CBS News learning top Senate Democrats want answers about a Justice Department settlement that permanently bars the IRS from pursuing certain tax claims against President Trump, his family, and potentially affiliated businesses. The lawmakers say the agreement raises serious questions about whether Trump-linked companies could also be shielded from the future tax enforcement. So a lot to break apart here. Live to CBS News Justice reporter Jake Rosen, who's been chasing this from the very beginning. So is this tax shield forever? And what do Democrats want to do about it now?
This tax shield that was given to President Trump, his two oldest sons, Eric and Don Jr., as well as the Trump Organization, only apply for any tax filings that were made for this year, Reed, going back into the past. They do not apply to future potential tax audits by the Department of Justice as part of this settlement between President Trump and his own government and Justice Department and IRS to settle that $10 billion suit that he brought. But what Senators Warren and Ron Wyden and Chuck Schumer are all asking questions of are about these Trump-affiliated or Trump-advised companies that are out in the ether making millions of dollars. Think about the reporting we had last week with President Trump's financial disclosures and the millions and millions of dollars that he made just in the last year on cryptocurrency and other things like that the Trump family either was involved in starting or currently advises on. The senators are asking of whether those tax filings and any work that the Trump family has done on that work potentially could also be immune because there's a provision in this one-page addendum by Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche that left the door open to potentially related brother and sister companies and any affiliated companies of the plaintiffs in this case, and i.e. the Trump family, could also potentially be immune from that. As we know, there's not a lot of regulation on some of these crypto industries, and whether the IRS and President Trump's own government would potentially investigate his own son seems to be unclear. That's why these senators are pushing for more answers. However, Reed, because Democrats are in the minority, they do not have subpoena power on this, and these organizations are not necessarily going to be forced to comply with this letter ask.
Okay, so while we have you, there's another matter that you've been reporting on. A federal judge ruled President Trump's blanket January 6 pardons do not apply, of course, to that Virginia man who's accused of planting pipe bombs outside the RNC and the DNC headquarters. What do you know there?
Well, that's right. A U.S. District Judge here in D.C. said that President Trump's pardons that he issued in the first hour of his presidency, pardoning or granting clemency to over 1,500 defendants of the Capitol riot on January 6, 2021, does not apply to the actions of Brian Cole, who's in court documents and multiple indictments now alleged to have planted those pipe bombs at the Democratic National Committee and Republican National Committee on the eve of January 6. Cole's lawyers argued in court filings and this motion to dismiss that he was a part of the actions on January 6th that was covered by those pardons because the pipe bombs were not discovered until January 6th in the afternoon, even though they were planted on the eve of that event, and quoting part of the FBI interview that Cole did with law enforcement after he was initially arrested late last year, saying that he traveled to Washington, D.C. as part of his anger at the government and going into the January 6th protest that he knew would be forming, and many of us did know would be forming. However, this judge, in what was really the biggest test of these pardons so far, and definitely the most high profile, given what these bombs would have done if they had exploded on that day, says that simply rejecting that notion, saying that the pardon only covers those who were actually convicted or indicted for their actions on that day, and there'll be a court hearing in this case later this week as Brian Cole and his attorneys continue to try to get these charges dismissed in this case. And federal prosecutors are seeking major penalties for not just the use of explosives, but traveling across interstate lines to plant these bombs allegedly.
All right, Jake Rosen, thank you for that. Good to see you.